What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. I am Sean Murphy, and today I am joined by the beat reporter for the Detroit Pistons for Clutch Points, but most importantly, one of my favorite people, Eric Vincent, is here. Eric, my guy, what is going on? It is so good to see you. Got to see you at Media Day on Monday, and
Yes.
now we get to run it up on a pod. How better could this week get, man? It's good to see you.
I get to work with my dog twice this week, man. I'm blessed out
Woo!
here, man. And I got before we get started, actually, Media Day was a great time. I gotta apologize because I watched back some of the videos and audio and whatnot. And me and you were both still learning at this thing, but I was cutting you off on a lot of questions and I wasn't doing it on purpose. That's my
Dude,
bad. I'm
that
trying to do, I'm trying to fit
brother,
in and get
that
more
is
questions.
that is the space, that is the beast of that space. You
Yeah,
go in
man.
for people that don't know how press conferences work, you essentially you get in when you possibly
Yes.
can,
Yes.
and you don't necessarily have a full window of how many questions you get to ask. You don't
Mm-mm.
really get a sense of when you'll get to jump in. It's just a matter of when. And so, like I literally got to ask more questions in media day than all of last season combined from all the events and stuff that I went to. So
Yeah.
it was a great day. So honestly, man, I was just thrilled with how it went as a whole,
Yeah.
nonetheless. And I feel like we learned, I feel like we learned a lot about where the team is at and just organizationally how everything's looking. And that's a big reason why I thought now was like a good time for us to run it up, just because normally I feel like media days just, kind of like a lot of like empty superlatives of like, oh yeah, worked hard this summer,
Yep.
excited to be back. But like, I think you could actually see some tangible things with this Pistons roster that showed that this year really can be different.
Yeah, there was a lot of good takeaways. I was very intrigued. Again, there was some good personality. It was cool to see some guys make some jokes. We had a good time. Shout out to all the other media members and beat reporters that were there. Everybody did a
Yep.
fantastic job. But yeah, learning and talking to the guys of the franchise. Look at Trajan Langdon. I love listening to that dude talk. JB Biggerstaff, he seems like he's bringing a new energy to this team. And a lot of the guys just seem super focused too, man. It was a really great experience just, from my career for sure. But from an NBA and basketball standpoint, as a fan, loved what I saw from these guys, man. I'm really excited to talk about it today.
Yeah, absolutely. There are, just a lot of different aspects, and we'll go through some clips, we'll go through some quotes, and we'll just kind of talk through, just like particular players and storylines that we're excited about. But first, I would be remiss if I didn't say this is from Half Court Reach, and every week we talk all things Pistons basketball and NBA basketball. If you like that, be sure you like the video down below and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more pods and episodes we have coming with the season starting up. We will have a whole lot more content coming your way. You can also follow myself on X at Sean Half Court. Also, make sure you go follow Eric Vincent at I am Eric Vincent. So you're not only making sure that you're tuning into his articles, to his content, his piston stuff, but this is a multifaceted human being, gentlemen. If you like wrestling, if you like music, if you like culture, if you like football, Eric Vincent's your guy. So be sure you go and follow him over there.
If you're a
But
Drake fan, don't follow me because I slander
yeah,
him all day.
yeah.
If you like
It,
Drake, don't follow me.
it
Sorry.
this also before we get started, if you're a Drake fan, this I know you're supposed to encourage all people to join and listen in, but this might not be the podcast for you.
That's the one
Like you're
community you can exclude. You don't need them
yeah,
over here.
yeah, let's just say you're not like us, you know what I mean? But
Well played.
I thought it was pretty good. I thought it was pretty good, but in all seriousness, Eric, let's start diving in and just talking about, specific takeaways just from Pistons Media Day, because the first thing that stuck out to me, and, this was just apparent, like, this wasn't even like a quote, this wasn't even like, like what anyone said. This was just a sheer observation. This team looks older, and I
Mhm.
and I mean that in a good way. Like, not even just, like, obviously the veterans that they brought in, Tobias Harris, Tim Hardaway Jr., like even like a Paul Reed, like they brought in guys who are experienced, who play NBA minutes. Malik Beasley, of course. But the the young players in-house as well. Isaiah Stewart is going into his 5th NBA season already. And, essentially he's already, a guy you can consider a veteran in this game. Cade Cunningham just seemed more mature and more, stoic and kind of like a different poise to him. I'm not sure like what your what your thoughts are, but to me, like you could just tell that there is a sense of a maturity to this team that quite frankly they've needed for years now.
Yeah, I think Tim Hardaway Jr. I think kind of commented on it. He said that what happened last season, even though it was rough to experience, I'm sure for young players, but it's good for them because it teaches you a lot. That kind of adversity, it should be able to help you grow and develop as a young player. So it really kind of seemed that way too. Like Asar, when he was asked about it, he didn't run from the questions. They all kind of talked like, we learned from what happened. What happened was the past, and we're ready to move forward at this point, and they all kind of seem focused and driven by that, like from the top down, whether it's from Trajan who kind of talked about it, JB who talked about it, and the players. Again, they all seem focused. There was a lot of good energy from it, a lot of good takeaways that they picked up from last season. And they all said that they're working and trying to be better. Cade said he's working on different things with his game.
Yep.
Asar working to get back healthy, and I'm sure we're going to talk about. But yeah, it was a lot of good things that showed that they are trying to take those maturation steps that you talked about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, actually one of the there's a really good quote from Cade. I asked him about, just that intensity level and, just if they've had those types of conversations about what happened last season. And I actually feel like this would be a pretty good time to listen to it. So this
Let's do
was
it.
my question and answer with Cade Cunningham, just about the team's intensity level going into this year's training camp.
Coming off of last season, do you notice a different level of intensity and focus from the group going into training camp? And have you guys talked about that fire of turning things around and wanting things to be different?
Yeah, it's definitely a high intensity. For the returners, I mean, obviously, we know what that's from. Last year was a lot on all of us, and we don't want to relive that. So, that's the main thing. And then, like I said about our vets, I think they all carry that same chip, and they want to prove something as well. So, um, adding all of that together, I think we have a group that is ready to turn things around and ready to, start getting the ball rolling.
And I think, like, within that, Eric, one thing that, like, stuck out to me, it's like, he said, like, "Yeah, the young guys, we all know what it is. We talk about it. We were there, we experienced it." But the older guys coming in, they have a chip on their shoulders as well. And I think there's something really to be said about, a lot of times, especially in, like, the NBA world, it's considered if you go to Detroit, it's considered a death sentence. But,
Mhm.
I think the likes of Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley, and Tobias Harris are really gonna wanna showcase that there's a lot more to there's a lot more days left of their game, and, they are not in the twilight years of their basketball career.
I completely agree. I mean, I even saw Tobias Harris going back and forth with some people on Instagram of the Philadelphia 76er community. Even myself, I tweeted a picture of him and Paul Reed taking the podium, and I think a Philadelphia 76ers page, I forgot, I think it was like Sixers Wire. They took it, and then it was nothing but slander underneath. So, players have showed that they pay attention to, what goes on for that outside noise, for that kind of motivation. It helps them, and it just shows that they're in tune for that. And I like that. Whatever it is to give you the chip on your shoulder, especially for somebody like Tobias going to his 14th season, people just, look at him as, someone who's, finesse deals and isn't a good player. He still has high value, especially for a team like the Detroit Pistons. And it seems like these guys are all self-aware of what this timeline is and what the priorities are. So, like, I'm sure Beasley wants to be effective on this team. Same with Tim Hardaway Jr. But I think they understand, helping develop this young core is also the primary focus for the foundation. So, hearing them share their motivation and share that passion to want to, help restore this franchise, it really made a big difference in terms of how I perceive things. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited to see what they can bring for sure.
Yeah, and, just about every veteran that has joined this roster this offseason, save for, Paul Reed was a waiver wire claim, but
Yep.
every other guy on this roster chose to come to Detroit.
Yep.
Essentially they all, they essentially wanted to be here. Tim Hardaway Jr., obviously, there was the transaction to acquire him, but, there's no qualms about coming back to, a home away from home to play, an hour from his alma mater. That's something that he seems, if anything, seems excited about. And, I just think that, again, not that the Pistons haven't had, veterans in-house or, over the last few years, but
Mhm.
the fact that they have guys who not only, can play consistently, but are able to consistently contribute is the big thing. And Tobias Harris, like you brought up him, like I think with what's happened in Philly, I think he's gotten so much unnecessary hate because he wasn't Jimmy Butler, which
Right.
which if you want to blame anyone there, blame the Philadelphia 76ers front office who chose
Absolutely.
to give him the max contract over
Right.
Tobias Harris. Whereas
Yep.
now in Detroit, for the circumstances he's being brought in for, I think this is going to be a real rejuvenating spot for Tobias Harris, and you could just tell the effect he's having already. It's immediate.
Yeah, you heard it from the players. They all spoke very highly about the presence that they have. Something I really like that I heard from Tobias because, obviously we asked a lot of basketball questions, but I love the part where he talked about the off-court discipline as well. How you eat, what time you go to sleep, how to spend
Yep,
your money. Like that kind of maturation as well translates on the court because it shows that they're not just there caring about you as athletes, they care about you as men too. And they're trying to do what's best for you, again, on and off the basketball court, taking
yep,
on that kind of a leadership role, accepting that role. And again, these guys are coming from playoff positions like Paul Reed and Tobias coming from Philly, Malik coming from Milwaukee, Tim Hardaway coming from Dallas, who was just in the finals. Like they're fresh out of it. So they understand what it takes to get to that postseason. Paul Reed kept mentioning that. He said, yo, that's really all I know is play to the postseason. And that's
yep.
really what I want to help make sure we can do. So, knowing they have that experience and knowing that there's more of that versatility. Like it's not like, they've had veterans before, but in a situation like last season with Bojan, he was hurt for like the first couple months and he was kind of limited with what he could bring as well. So I feel like
Yep.
they got the perfect blend of veterans from a guy that's a multi-dimensional scorer like Tobias, shooters like Hardaway and Beasley, and then Paul Reed, who's multi-dimensional as well. I think they got the perfect blend of guys to help add to this foundation.
Yeah, it's kinda like a perfect it's a perfect blend because they got guys who don't need to be the ones that are carrying the load for you every single night,
Right.
but if you need them to step up, they are more than capable of doing so. And, you also talk about how, you're just with the spacing on this team, a lot of those guys, a lot of the shooting that the Pistons did add are those veteran players and those veteran pieces. So, in the event that the young players do struggle to get their shooting going, they do have those older, reliable players. And, it's just, to me, it was, just, the thing that got me optimistic was, not just Tobias talking about those habits, but even like, like Malik Beasley just talking about, like the consistency it takes to be a great 3-point shooter. And, like, there's been a lot of talk of, like how much of an impact Fred Vincent will have. But, having another guy like a Malik Beasley, you know, on the team as well, who worked his way to become one of the premier shooters in the game of basketball from a percentage standpoint. This guy competed in the 3-point contest a couple of years ago. So, like when you talk about just all of the components and the things that you need to have a team that fosters growth and development, the veterans are such a big piece of that. And the fact that they're bought in to that particular mission is a really big thing for this Pistons team.
It's been something they were missing for a while, especially if you look at the roster they had last season. Like it was a bunch of young players that they drafted in, and a lot of prove it players too. Like you have
Yep.
a James Wiseman or Marvin Bagley, who again they're talented players, but they're also in positions where, just like the rookies and the young players that they drafted in, they need to play to prove themselves. Someone even brought that up. A lot of people actually have talked about the possibility of bringing in somebody like a Markel Fultz as the backup point guard. He's basically the exact same thing as those other guys I just talked about. When you have somebody like Malik Beasley, Tim Hardaway Jr., like you just said, they don't need to be the guy, on a night to night basis. If they get hot, for a couple games, cool. But for the most part, they understand why they're here. And while, Troy Weaver was bringing in those prove it player guys on the cheap kind of contracts like the Beasleys and the Tim Hardaway Juniors have, they're also not in a position where if they don't play, it's not gonna like sabotage anything. Like Wiseman had to play to get his next opportunity.
Yep.
Bagley had to play to get his next opportunity. Beasley is gonna have another shot, even if he doesn't close out a finish season here. Whatever he may do, he's kind of solidified where he is as a player. So knowing how that is the complement for a young player like Cade Cunningham to have a shooter and a player coach on the floor with these kind of veterans, it's what they've been missing for a while. And especially like we keep saying, it's guys who wanted to be here. You always have to ask that question, unfortunately, for Detroit athletes, especially for the Pistons. And they all convincingly to me spoke that they really wanted to be here. And I think that means more than anything.
Yeah, when you're building that culture of winning, a lot of
Yeah.
times, you have a lot of people that don't wanna be on the ship as, as it's going down or getting brought out of out of the abyss, so to speak, and so, yeah, the fact that you have, a coach that's as locked in as he is, but also, solid veteran pieces, as locked in as they are as well, just bodes well for, like, what type of season, they could have. Perhaps the biggest news that we learned from media day, I would say, Eric, and I think you would agree, is probably the health situation surrounding Ausar Thompson.
Yeah.
Trajan came out right off the bat and, just, established right off front that that Ausar Thompson is not currently cleared for full participation in training camp. He's not cleared for 5-on-5 or any, any basketball against other people. He can
Hmm.
do individual workouts. He's working he's working with Fred Vincent. He's, still getting into the gym. He talked a lot about, how hard he got at it this off season. I don't really want to speculate too much on when his return will be because, it sounds like not only they just there's just not really much of a precedence for this, right? And
Right.
when you talk about the health and the well-being, of an Asar Thompson, that's something you necessarily don't want to, but also don't need to rush. And I think another big thing about the pieces that they brought in this offseason is the fact that there isn't so much pressure on an Asar Thompson to come in and be Superman, essentially like he had to be last year in order for this group to be competitive. You have all those wings that are there in the interim. And if he's not back till December or God forbid January, they'll be much better equipped to handle that this year.
Yeah, I think I'm not gonna say it's good news, but what you said is 100% correct. There's not a need to rush that development. Something that stuck with me. I asked Tim Hardaway Jr. about his relationship with Cade Cunningham. Going back to when Cade had his season-ending shin injury, and he said he was happy that Cade didn't rush back. Sometimes it's okay to be selfish with your health and your career to make sure you can be providing and at your best on the court and off the court. So
Yep.
this is basically the exact same thing. We haven't seen Asar play since March. This isn't anything that you take lightly either. Blood clots is something serious. They said he's going through,
It ended Chris
protocols.
Bosh's career.
That's a huge thing to remember. Absolutely. So for someone like Asar, again, a great ceiling that he has, is a great young man. You don't want to rush that or overlook the seriousness of it. He's going through the protocols with the league. It is also encouraging to see that he's also being active. You see the social media, he is working with Fred Vincent, trying to get his shot together, and staying active and being around the team. He seemed to be in good spirits as well, too, which I really liked. He said
Yep.
he feels fine. He didn't say he's feeling any ailments. It didn't seem like there was anything that was troubling him. So that was at the very least, uplifting from what we know thus far. Again,
Yep.
hopefully it does progress. Take your time and figure it out. But we're definitely praying and keeping our fingers crossed for Asar. Hopefully for the best for him.
Yep, but the one thing that definitely hasn't changed about Asar is he doesn't seem, any less locked in, just on, his game on improvement. That's just, he's someone, they talked about how Jaden Ivey is someone that, if anything they have to tell to slow down. I think Asar Thompson, is very much another one of those guys too. And, speaking of Jaden Ivey, that was something that stood out was Trajan and JB were, both kind of went out of their way to praise the work ethic, of Jaden Ivey and just the way that he's gone about and attacked things. And, we were able to talk to him as well. And, he seemed, his kind of calm and, kind of, usual self in all regards. It's funny. It feels like fans just try to read into, into how he's doing about, every single minute all the time now.
Right.
But, when you talk about, just we talk a lot about how the spacing and, these veterans are going to be a real blessing to like a Cade Cunningham. That
Hmm.
helped Jaden Ivey's game
Yeah.
tremendously as well to have
Yeah.
that extra room to operate. And, when you talk about having, JB and Trajan and just all these different guys that are, more adept to trying new things, into
Hmm.
experimenting. I think Jaden Ivey can be a real beneficiary of that if they go about it the right way.
Couldn't agree more. His versatility, I think, brings so much to this team. And the versatility that they tried to tinker with last season just wasn't working. Like, I understand the logic behind wanting to bring someone like Jaden Ivey off the bench, but when you're sacrificing his skill set for a Killian Hayes, who has a very, very, very limited skill set, that really hurt this team a lot. And then, playing guys like, again, I liked Alec Burks for a little while, but it just seemed like he was kind of playing outside of what the Pistons needed at the time. So at this point now, where you have stationary shooters, and they even talked about it too. Malik Beasley, when he was asked about playing with Cade Cunningham, he said, like, I'm not a dominant, ball dominant player, so I can be able to just roam and spot up and look for open shots for myself. So these guys aren't coming in looking to overshadow what these guys can bring, because the primary ball handlers should be those two guys. And if you want to work on that versatility with Jaden Ivey to give him some more space, again, you'll see more opportunities with him playing on ball, putting Cade Cunningham in the post, letting him play off ball. I think when you have shooters and veterans who kind of understand spacing and timing a lot better than they have in the past seasons with the Pistons, I think that's going to show in, like you said, for Jaden Ivey a lot. People don't talk about it. We always talk about, how Cade is going to be able to benefit. He definitely will. But, Ivy's going to get a lot of this benefit as well. Jalen Duren, too. Like, I think he played a lot of out of position last season, where he's spending a lot of time at the top of the key. So I think now they're kind of understanding where they're best suited and how to maximize that instead of rushing things that don't fit the best. So I
Yep.
think we're going to see this roster flourish, a lot better than people may expect, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And just talking about, another guy that they're looking to experiment with, that they're really excited to see, what he could do, Jalen Duren. They talked quite a bit, about,
Mhm.
getting him in more, like more situations as the primary player playmaker, putting him in more situations to do some DHOs at the top of the key, and, just to be more integral on that side of the basketball. But it just seems like it felt to me like Jalen Duren is at a spot where he's had a lot of experience now over these last, over these first couple of seasons. He's had the 2 summers with the USA select team, so he's had a lot of time, working alongside like a Bam Adebayo, even a
Mhm.
Joel Embiid, seeing the best of the best go at it and how they go about their craft. I think Jalen Duren is in a spot where he knows exactly what he needs to do in order to, begin to reach the potential that he has. And, as much as I'm intrigued and I'm excited to see what he can do, as a playmaker and how that can, bring variety to the offense, the real thing I'm interested to see is, especially under this JB Bickerstaff, led coaching staff and you know, that defensive mentality. I'm excited to see how he can develop as a defender this year, because I've always felt that the true thing that would take this team to a different stratosphere, like as quick as they could reach it, is Jalen Duren becoming that guy on the defensive side of the ball, because that's where this team's identity, as becoming a defensive team, in my opinion, that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I think I say it all the time. I think Jalen Duren was the best acquisition that Troy Weaver did while he was here, outside of drafting Cade Cunningham. I think being able to
Yeah.
move up and find such a great complement to Cade and Jaden Ivey's game. Because be clear, even when Cade wasn't playing his second season, Jaden Ivey did a really good job when he was on ball, finding Jalen Duren for a lot of those open lobs and those looks right at the rim.
Yep.
And he's a really hard worker too. Like, I got a lot of looks pregame, last season, watching him warm up with Cade and, with the assistant coaches. He spends a lot of time working on his jump shot as well, and his free throw shooting. His numbers shot up, I think, like what, 15, 17% from when he was a
Yep.
rookie. So, like, that work is there. That desire to be better and to grow is clearly there for him. And it's been proven as well. I don't have any doubts that he can definitely do it defensively as well. Again, as long as, he's been really dealing with this ankle problem. If that continues to be a thing, I'm gonna be a little bit worried. But if he's healthy, again, we saw it. I think at the beginning of the season against teams like Charlotte, against the Bulls, the opener against the Heat, I think he was really good
Yep.
in. Like, he's had some very impressive performances. It's just kind of sporadic. And obviously for
Yeah.
young players, consistency is everything. So as soon as he starts taking that step of consistency, I think we're gonna see that ceiling, get higher and higher for this kid.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it helps that, again, not having to put all the pressure on him. They have a more than capable big room this year.
Yeah.
It's funny that big room in Detroit last season, not only did it feel cluttered, but it also did not feel reliable.
No.
Like you had Marvin Bagley who, he could certainly give you 10, 15 points a night, no problem every single night.
Right.
But the defensive side of the ball, it just never got to where it needed to be.
No.
And then James Wiseman, the question of him coming in was, did he miss too much basketball in order for him to catch up? And, the answer pretty quickly was yes.
Yeah.
He just has not played enough basketball. Whereas now you have Isaiah Stewart sliding back into his natural position
Love
more
that.
as that five,
Yeah.
which he talked about, being excited about. And I think that time at the four is really going to benefit, expand his game at the five, when he's in that spot. You can stretch the floor more with him. He doesn't necessarily always have to stay by the basket. But then there's also this guy they went and got this summer named Paul Reed. And he's a guy that it perhaps of the players in Detroit thus far, he's perhaps had the most buzz of, oh, this guy's good.
Hmm.
Like specifically Ron Holland talked about, I'm gonna be honest, never heard of Paul Reed. First couple weeks of me being here, Paul Reed showed me exactly who the hell he was.
Hmm.
And he was like, Paul Reed is good. And, Tobias essentially said something to the effect of, this is exactly what I knew, Paul was capable of. So to be able to see him, go out and show that is very cool. So, when you talk about, like this Pistons team and, just taking steps and, that consistency, I think they're going to have a lot better rim protection all 48 minutes a game this year than they did last year. And when you talk about building wins, those tight margins, that makes a massive difference.
Absolutely. Lot of There's been a lot of love for B-ball Paul on social media, even with the viral video that went around where they're taking the picture.
Yep.
They were hyping him up as he's coming into the crowd and whatnot. I was loving that. And
Yep.
again, back to that, Sixers post. Even a lot of the Philly fans were sad to see him go. He said he learned a lot from playing next to Joel Embiid, and I think his play style fits very well off the bench, coming up for or next to a guy like Isaiah Stewart, especially if he's going to play the five, because that like Stu did a good job of developing being a spread out shooter if he needed to be. I don't think that needs to be a primary like focus of the offenses of what they do, but knowing that that's possible and available, it creates more room for somebody like Paul Reed, who works very well in like intermediate spaces. He's really good at scoring from the mid range, can put the ball on the deck and go to get his shot from the rim. I was really impressed with him. He's a lot bigger than I thought he was too. Like I know he's not. I think he was like 6'9", 6'10". He looked a little bigger than that and like pretty strong to me. So
Yeah.
like from what they had last season, where a lot of spots like the center position, the point guard position, it was just cluttered with too many players. Now at this point, like it's not overcrowded at the guards. It's not overcrowded in the big man spot, and
Yep.
there's a great depth of wings that you can rely on for different things too. Especially
Yep.
with Ausar still dealing with his health, it creates opportunities for guys like Ron Holland. It gives you the shooters for the veterans. Having Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley, it gives them opportunities too. So I think they did a really good job of refreshing that roster with areas of need at the right spots and the right positions.
Absolutely. And you talked about B-ball Paul. You just look at, he's 25 years old. This is going to be his fifth, season in the league now. He's, it feels like, this could be a real opportunity for him to kind of come into his own. And, if he plays well, not only could that potentially be, an opportunity for him to extend long term in Detroit, but if the Pistons so desire, it gives them more opportunities to make a move, whether that
Mhm.
is maximizing what you could get for a Paul Reed, whether that possibly means you feel like you can move from an Isaiah Stewart because of, the fact that you have that guy behind, Jalen Duren. There's a lot of different possibilities. And, I think that's, kind of another big piece of the takeaway as well is, it's another year where they're not committing to the win total, where,
Mhm.
where they're saying the wins and losses isn't the goal, but rather the goal is to develop that identity into put Pistons basketball on the court. Now, that's something they've talked about in years past of, getting good on the like they've essentially just talked about getting better defensively. and
Hmm.
we're not going to be the terminology used before was we will not be the Detroit Pistons until we defend the basketball.
Yep.
But now, just being much more intentional about talking about, that identity, talking about how that's a massive part of their identity. To me, it seems like there's a lot more of an understanding about how to build that identity and to actually how to go about that with this current team. And also you just look personnel wise, this is a team that's a lot more equipped to play a style of Detroit Pistons basketball because you actually have players who can defend on this roster.
Yeah, it wasn't a whole lot of like a lot of the quotes that we talked about in terms of their preparation for this season. It showed a balance of, hey, we're still learning, but we're also trying to put a plan together as well.
Yep.
So, and again, like you said, I think they're better equipped to do that than they were with last season. Monty kind of, blowing things up with the bombshell of bringing Jaden Ivey off the bench, starting Killian Hayes, playing him 30 plus minutes, playing guys like Isaiah Livers 30 plus minutes. Like it was just a lot of things that didn't make any kind of sense. So, like, again, if there's any kind of night where Tim Hardaway Jr. is maybe playing 31, 32 minutes, it means he was probably hot that day. But that's not something consistent that they're probably going to rely on. So, knowing that they're able to kind of, have that versatility and have different guys they can lean on and still keep the objective, what it is in place, I think this is a perfect spot for him. Like, I really like what Troy Weaver said last season, where he said, we want to have every game be meaningful. Like, we don't want to be basically dead in the water in December or before the All-Star break. And unfortunately, that's what happened last season. So hopefully by, the spring, they're still playing, games that mean something, whether they're in
Yep.
the play-in hunt or whatever they're doing, we'll see where they're going to be at. But at the very least, you don't want to be just, turning the game on just because there's nothing else to do. They want to be
Yeah.
putting on games because there's something, focused there, because there's an identity, and because they're actually improving. So hopefully we'll be able to see that by the end of the season, like they keep talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. There are a lot of good tidbits and just a lot of overall good information and insight that was able to come out of media day. One last quick thing on media day as well. Another guy I was impressed by was Bobby Klintman. Not that I wasn't
Oh
impressed by
man,
like a Ron Holland as well, but
yeah.
just when you listen to Bobby Klintman, the things that just stuck out to me right away, and I'm not sure about you, but just super energetic, just when you hear him talk about the game, he just seems like he is just a sponge, just wanting to learn as much as humanly possible. Like his IQ about the game is really high, but also just another guy who just seems like he is a basketball in gym rat. And I said this to my buddy Troy, who I do the pod with. I could see a scenario where this is similar to Jonas Jerebko and Austin Day, where the Pistons might have gotten a second round guy who might be more ready day one than their first round pick. And I don't know if this is the same situation. Like, I still think Ron Holland could be a really good player,
Hmm.
but just from what we've seen thus far, with Bobby Klintman, I think it's very, I at first, you talk about, oh, well, how much could he be playing in the G League this year? I think there's a legitimate chance at some point this season he has a regular role on this roster.
I completely agree. Like, yeah, I do think he'll probably spend some time in the G League, but he's way too talented. And based on what his skill set is, and how, like you said, how adaptable he is and how hard he works, that opportunity is going to be there for him off the bench. Like, I don't see that being something impossible for this kid. Like, it was really fun listening to him talk. You can say the exact same thing about Ron Holland.
Yep.
Crazy enough, I really do think the rookies had more energy than anybody else at media day when they were talking. It is Ron Holland said, like, I was super nervous when I got drafted. Now I'm able to cut up. I'm feeling good. I'm loving my team. And Bobby
Yep.
Clement was giving the same kind of energy. So it's very, very uplifting to kind of see them. It's cool to see, the veterans, guys like Jalen Duren, the foundation guys, embrace them. And it seems like, again, they are going to have an opportunity to kind of fill in those areas that are going to be the biggest needs for this Piston team in the front court. Klintman, I think, is super fun to watch in the summer league. I really had a great
Yep.
time watching him grow. And again, I think we're going to see a lot of that in the regular season too. Preseason is
Yeah.
going to be fun watching him on the floor.
Yeah, Ron Holland perhaps had the funniest quote of the day, by the way. Corey Woods, shout out Corey, another one of my guys. He was
Yeah.
asking him about, he was like, you said that you believe that you can be one of the best shooters in the league. And Ron just went, like, just without a beat, just went, I meant that, by
I
the way.
meant that. I meant that.
He was just like, "I meant that."
That was great.
It was so good, just
Mhm.
absolutely gold, but also it's one of those jokes where he was dead serious. He was very intentional, like, "I meant that. Like, that's going to happen." So, excited to see his future and what he can do as well. I talking about, just like storylines going into the season, I think to me that is when I think of, like what are the what are the storylines for this team? For me, when you talk about the uncertainty of the rotation, I think you start with how much will these guys actually play day one? Because
Mhm.
you know that probably by the end of the season, especially, if they're not quite in the play-in picture, the playoff picture, they'll get a lot of opportunities to play, especially in February or March. But I wonder, and I'm not sure what your thoughts are, how much, if at all, will these guys play opening night and in those first 10 plus games? Because, you last year and those last few years, it wouldn't even be a question of if they'd be in the starting lineup. But
Mhm.
now you have a lot more capable guys. And they've talked about wanting to put the best lineups that they can out there. I'm not sure if those guys crack those lineups day one.
Yeah, I don't think they're gonna. I mean, granted, because of Asar's health, I think it's going to create an opportunity for Ron Holland to maybe get some, legitimate minutes off the bench in game one, game two. How often he's going to be playing and how many minutes and how he's used is up in the air. But I do think that opportunity is going to be there. He talked about it as well too. He said, like, I think it was you who asked the question. Who asked you? I think what you said. Basically, what do you think you can do to make an impact week one or game one? And he said, I'm going to focus on the defensive end. I mean, that's obviously the Detroit mindset in terms of how the Pistons play. But I think that's feasible. I
Yep.
kind of, I'm not saying he's going to be this person, but I can see him maybe following a path like a Jimmy Butler, where he was more so focused defensively to start early in his career. And we already know he has offensive upside, but granted, considering who's in front of him, we're not going to have to rely on it so early. But if it gets there, then maybe you can ramp up that responsibility for him. I kind of see that timeline for him. And I think we'll see a lot of that effort, in terms of the defensive end to start so early in his career. But yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it's an impossible thought to think him and Bobby could get some quality minutes off the bench early.
Yeah, the thing that stuck out to me with Ron Holland was just he seems like he's focused on the right things.
Mhm.
And, he understands, coming into the league where he can have an impact day one. And, even though he went through some of those trials and those difficult things, like with G League Ignite, I think, I think it's perfect in a sense that he went through something similar to what Detroit went through last year because he's not coming in with any, with any misconceptions about what that was like. He's not coming in, without any awareness. He knows exactly what that team went through last year because he was probably on the only team in basketball that went through the same thing.
Right. So one of the things that really stuck out to me when they drafted him was talking about how he didn't really have much contact with the Pistons. That
Yep.
worried me a little bit. I'm like, oh, well, okay, well, I guess so. But then finding out what Trajan said, where a lot of agents were saying, hey, don't go to Detroit, don't work out for them, yada yada yada. So knowing that on top of Ron's relationship with Cade Cunningham, knowing they were able to reconnect, knowing he had some good counseling coming into the league, and knowing he had a good support system around him, I think that kind of helps him grow and kind of sprout out to the player that we're seeing right now, going from kind of the nervous guy at draft day to now he's being outspoken, cracking jokes, having a good time, and blending it well with the team. I think it's a lot of good things to be excited for with this young man. And again, I think we might see a lot of those flashes sooner than later with him. I really do.
Yeah, I agree, and it's just there's just a lot of different players that you could just talk about being excited to see what they can do and the growth that they can take. I'm curious just from your perspective, Eric. Like when we talk about those storylines and those
Mhm.
things that we're looking for, not only just heading into the season, but just just this season as a whole. What are the storylines that intrigue you about this team? Like it can be like whether it's players, whether just it's narratives, just things that you want to see how they develop. What fascinates you in particular about this Pistons team going into this slate here in the next couple of weeks?
I think the biggest one for me is the handling of the backcourt. Again, we know Cade's gonna play 30 plus minutes, Ivy's gonna play 30 plus minutes, but based on how things went last season, where Monty was allergic to staggering, didn't like playing, Cade or Ivy with the bench unit at all. And, there being so many point guards as well. Like, honestly, I wish Monty Morris was on the team right now instead of
Yep.
last season so they could have a veteran. But there were, again, Killian and then Monty there, and then even Ausar who's getting on ball reps too, and Jalen Duren passing from on the top of the key. Like, it was just a lot of things that were kind of all over the place. Now, I asked Marcus Sasser, we haven't talked much about him, but I
Yep.
asked him at media day, like, hey, it's not as crowded as a depth chart. How do you see that in terms of your opportunity? He said, look, I'm trying to do whatever I can, whether it's playing on ball, off ball, play shooting guard, point guard, whatever it is. I want to help and I want to be the best that I can. And I understand that because you'll have the ability to do that. Like, I think there's a world where, we could see Sass playing some off ball reps, as a shooter on the two, coming off the bench. He's a good shooter. Defenses, force him to play zone. I can see him, going through as a rover, spotting up on the perimeter, getting shots and open looks. And I want to see how they fit. So I'm really curious to see if JB Biggerstaff, works to that. He spoke about it a lot. He did that a lot when he was in Cleveland in terms of staggering, his guards, making sure at least one of them were on the floor at all times. I feel like they should be doing the exact same thing with these two talented guys. And I
Yep.
really want to see how Sasser fits in with that because this is a huge opportunity for him to show that he can be here to make it work.
Marcus Sasser was maybe the most interesting player to me that spoke at media day because I would say of all of the players that spoke, I would say he is the one that I think, not only, he has the least clarity of where he fits within everything, but I just think he has the least bit of clarity of just where his game is at, where things could head because you talk about the talents that he has and the flashes that he showed. I mean, that night in Milwaukee where he essentially turned into a reincarnation of Tyrese Maxey,
Oh man.
like
Yeah.
that just that sticks out in Pistons heads. And how can it not? Because that was the full display of what the peak of Marcus Sasser can be in this league. But it's again, you talk about it of how comfortable is he playing that point guard spot because he
Yep.
talked about some of those things of talking about that. I think if anything, he's probably thinking a lot more in the court than he was, which, when you're thinking too much, especially when you only have a 24-second shot clock, like those could be the split seconds of, your window to score closing. Those passing windows no longer being there, right? So,
Yep.
for me, I'm just interested to see, how much if how much of that point guard role he's going to be playing, how much he's going to be, forced to be that facilitator and, how is he going to look because he didn't look very comfortable even in the summer league
Mhm.
necessarily playing that role. So, to me, I think Marcus Sasser is at his best when he's looking to score, when he's given the ability to shoot the ball, when he doesn't necessarily have to be that on ball guy, but with his size, with where he is within the roster, that's kind of the difficult thing is he almost has to be that on ball point guard, for this team. So it to me when I talk about like players, I'm just most interested to see where they're at the end of the season versus where they're at now. I think it's market, and I don't mean like whether or not they're on the roster. I just
Right,
mean
right, right.
how things develop.
Yeah. Yeah, it was real clear that in the summer league he was working on being a point guard. Like we saw him dribbling a lot in his first summer league, obviously having the 40-point breakout game against Indiana. Yeah, this time around, this past summer, he was a lot different. He was definitely looking more focused on how to set up his teammates, how to orchestrate an offense and not just how can I go get my shot. And I respect that and appreciate that. You want to see him work on those kind of things, especially a point guard. Like I don't have a problem with a point guard working on something like that. The issues I had was where like Jalen Duren in his second summer league, and he's bringing the ball up the court and he's doing
Yep.
all the stuff that he doesn't need to be doing so quickly. Like that, I don't want to see. So yeah, I think he has. I, I think I really think he honestly has the most to prove based on the opportunity in front of him. It's not to
Yep.
say that like he's whatever in terms of talent or anything. He's a super talented player, but I think he has the biggest opportunity to cement himself considering where the point guard or guard rotation is at this point. Again, it's
Yep.
you don't have a Burks in front of you. You don't have Killian in front of you. Like, you're gonna have time to play with with and without Cade and Jay Ivey. So it's a lot of opportunity to show that he can be, a pretty impressive and helpful piece off the bench with this young core. And I think he can have a chance to really make something happen.
Yeah, I would say the biggest goal for Marcus Sasser this season is to not give Trajan Langdon a reason to shop for another point guard because,
Yes.
I think that would essentially be, the spelling of the end of his time in Detroit if that
Right.
were, if that were to happen. If he can show that, he's able to come in off the bench and really play solid in that role, not only I think that's another thing that opens up Cade, to play more of the three. And you talk about the handling of that backcourt. I think you talk about, you have to talk about how they use and utilize Cade. And I think that's something that JB, Biggerstaff's talked a lot about is how he wants to experiment more with Cade at the three. He wants to
Hmm.
see Cade, become that two-way star that, that we all think he is. And, that means having a bigger role on the defensive side of the ball too. So, in order for that to happen and be successful, you have to get guys like Marcus Sasser involved. You have to
Right.
get guys like Ausar more comfortable handling, like being on the ball and handling the basketball. So, yeah, I just think that's definitely one of the most, just interesting things to watch as far as that goes. And I mean, obviously, it's I think another guy is just Simone Fontecchio, just coming
Yes.
in from the deadline, last year, even though Troy Weaver, did not have a good year overall last year. I think
Hmm.
it's pretty undeniable that the Simone Fontecchio acquisition was a damn steal.
Yep.
And then the Pistons, like Trajan Langdon, worked off of that and got a contract extension that also to me felt like a damn steal.
Hmm.
And this is a guy who coming into the summer, like coming out of the summer, he had to get settled and acclimated in Detroit, had to had a baby, just had all these different things going on. But now that he is here, like there's more stability within the roster. There's more stability within, where they're heading. And I think the thing that's going to make, Simone potentially even better this season is he's not going to be put in that position last year where he was essentially the 3-point shooting of this team when he played. Now to be alongside other floor spacers, to not be, the only guy they're going to hone in on. I think having, that kind of varied role where some nights he could be one of your main go-to guys, but also he can just be one of those, utility players and just focus on being the best Simone Fontecchio he can be. I think that's something that, is just going to put him in a real position to succeed. And whether he comes off the bench, whether he starts, I think, I think he is immediately just one of the best, most reliable players on this roster.
Yeah, no, I was say did she because that's gonna see me. But moving Kevin Knox and a pick for Fontecchio was definitely the best move done by Troy Weaver last season. You could argue Fontecchio was their second best player for good stretches through the game or through the season. You
Yeah.
shame he only got to play like what 16 games. It didn't really seem like he was on the court a lot, but man, was he so effective. And he was honestly an upgrade from Bojan. Bojan
Yep.
was playing a lot of ISO ball where he was dribbling too much, taking a lot of step backs and kind of wild shots sometimes, and obviously being injured, hurt them a little bit. Tech was a good defender, a good help defender, and he was able to move a lot better offensively in terms of, spotting up for looks, passed off by Cade or whoever else, or he could have the ability to go get his own shot. He ran well in transition as well. I was super impressed by how he played. He said he was excited to be here. He's another person that said he wanted to return and come back to play with the Pistons. Say that Cade Cunningham playing with Cade Cunningham makes life so much easier for him. Like I
Yep.
love hearing that from him, and you see it reflected in his game. He said he never really had a role like how we had on Detroit, and he flourished in it. He absolutely flourished in it, and I couldn't agree with you more. Like for me, I would personally start him, but if he does come off the bench, I completely understand why he would because he's still skillful enough that it's going to be a huge boost and upgrade for your second unit. And he can still play staggered minutes with the starting lineup as well. He might be your sixth or seventh man. So, yeah, I would be totally fine with however they intend to use him because he's super talented. And I think JB Biggerstaff is going to find a way to keep him valuable with this team.
Yeah, I would say there's probably about a 100% chance that Asar will not be active or ready to go opening night. And if
Right.
that's the case, then there's really no argument to not have Simone in the starting lineup, in my opinion. Like you can I and I think that's just another thing as well is, it's gonna be a continued storyline of what is that starting five, what is that reliable rotation for this team,
Hmm.
by the end of the season, what is going to be that roster that I mean, that lineup, that rotation they look to close games,
Hmm.
the thing that they rely on. And, it very well could look different because this team could make moves this season. The thing that, that Trajan really did well was not only did they position themselves, to be more competitive, to have, to fit a lot of needs that this roster has, but, as we've talked about a lot on this show and, just, I think it's important to highlight, there is not a lot of commitments beyond next season on this roster.
Yep.
You have, like, really the only players that you're committed to long term are Cade Cunningham and Isaiah Stewart has, an option in 2027, 2028. Other than that, everybody else is pretty much here, through next season. So, if things do go down, kind of spiral out of control, but also, if things go well and they want to upgrade, they are very much in a position to do so. So, you just talk about, not to say that I'm expecting any wholesale changes
Hmm.
anytime soon.
Right.
They're in position for whatever happens. And, I would expect by the by the deadline, I would expect something will happen. It's just of what magnitude.
Absolutely. Yeah, they came into the offseason with a lot of cap flexibility and now they have a lot of roster flexibility as well. We
Yep.
talked about that a lot with Troy Weaver when he was there. He unfortunately didn't use a lot of it. I mean, there were still reports and rumors that teams were offering first round picks for Bojan and he said no. There were people that were offering higher picks and offers that they got in exchange for Alec Burks and he was still saying no. So at this point, again, the roster is not as crowded and it makes a lot more sense in terms of flexibility, whether it's bringing in new players or just filling out what your rotation is going to be. JB spoke at practice. I think Amari Sankofa tweeted, shout out to O. He said that they're going to be using preseason to kind of decide what that starting five is going to be. Apparently, they don't really have one in mind yet. They're still kind of
Yep.
working through things, which completely makes sense. I understand, stepping into your first role is with the team as the coach. So yeah, this is going to be a good test for them. They're playing some pretty good teams in the preseason. So I think this is going to be a pretty good test and display of what the future could look like for this team. There's a role in a world where maybe Isaiah Stewart is possibly starting at the four, or maybe he's coming off the bench. But I don't know. There's different things that they could try and mix around with and play with. Again, we'll see what they figure out, but I'm super excited to see. It's gonna be a very intriguing year with this roster.
It feels like it's cruel and unusual punishment that not even 7 days into their season, they have to go or into their training camp, they have to go and play Giannis Antetokounmpo. Like, that's just there should be some form of, like, like, law against that, but, it's just like you said, they are going to be tested right away. And, I think when you look at, just overall the totality, of this roster and just everything that they have, I just, they're a lot more, they're a lot more built to withstand whatever things come their way. And I think the biggest thing that this roster has going for it, just even just in the immediate is just the vibe is just so incredibly different. And you could just tell there's a real intentionality of just bringing the joy back to the day to day, which I know people hear that and they might roll their eyes or they're like, well, who cares if they're happy or not? Just go win games. That makes you happy. But when you are a young team and you know that you're not going to go out and win a lot of games, and you know that the whole thing is just focusing on getting better and keeping your head right, and and staying as as even keen as you can. When it sucks to come to work every day, that's not a conducive environment to growth and to
Right.
improvement. And so when you have guys, like a Tobias Harris, who as good of a basketball player as he is, he's renowned for being an even better human being.
Hmm.
When you have guys, like him that you bring in to put alongside an Isaiah Stewart, you bring in, Tim Hardaway Jr., just the whole feel, and then obviously JB Bickerstaff, spearheading all of that. I just think off of a lot of these things alone, it just seems like a better team dynamic, and it seems like a group that's more ready to play for each other, which when you talk about wins and losses, that's as big of a deal as it gets.
Yeah, from top to bottom, everything just seems way more organized. I mean, from even Trajan Langdon bringing in the guys he wanted with him to kind of help round out the front office, JB Bickerstaff and the assistant coaches that he has to kind of fill in different roles, like Luke Walton helping here, Sidney Lowe helping here, bringing Jarrett Jack back for comfort with Cade Cunningham, the guy he did his pregame warmups with. Like,
Yep.
it seems like everything is just more in line with in terms of their responsibilities in compared to last season where like Tom Gores had a say in acquisitions and playing rotations. Like when you need your owner to tell Monty, hey, play Jay and Ivy, you know something is going wrong. I don't think
Yeah.
JB Bickerstaff is going to have that problem. I think he'll be disciplined and well off and know to know, hey, we're gonna have to maybe make some changes here, or maybe let's try this and see if this works. I don't think we're gonna see a whole lot of interference in different ways that we've seen over the past few seasons. Again, things look really sloppy, kind of unorganized, and it was in a position where a lot of the responsibility fell on the young players too. So now, like you said, having a Tobias Harris, Trajan, and JB said, the guys who have really been at the spearhead of our leadership has been Cade and Tobias Harris. So we've heard Jalen Duren, as well, and that's cool. That's fine. I like his leadership qualities. I think he's got a great personality with the team, but it says something to also have a few veterans in there as well to say, hey, Rook, or hey, young kid, that was smart and that was true. I like what you're teaching, but also add this as well. This also helps as well. I think they'll be able to bring that knowledge, again, coming from playoff positions where they had pretty valuable and, intricate roles as well as starters and bench players from top to bottom. So, again, it just seems like they replenished with so many things and so many people in the right places of responsibility instead of just juggling so much at one time and just figuring stuff out. Teams seem to have a pretty clear line of development, and I think we're going to see it in a pretty good timeline with this team.
Yeah, I agree. And it's obviously there's just an excitement for, for things to get back up and rolling, this time of year, just, the like basketball season starting, there's just an energy that always goes with it. But, this I just think with, just with a lot of the things that this team has gone through over the last few years, one last thing I think that's important to note is, there was a lot of talk about the buzz that is in the city right now. And,
Mm-hmm.
like this is a group that is very aware of the run that's happening with the Tigers right now.
Oh yeah.
And, just how much buzz there's been, with that Lions game. And like it wasn't just, like Cade Cunningham who talked about like multiple guys, like Tobias Harris was in the Palace when the Pistons, made one of their last playoff runs. So
Yep.
you have a guy on this roster who has literally been there.
Yep.
And so, like I know Detroit gets joked on, and like it gets called the worst market in basketball. But as you and I both have seen in droves just through our lifetime, and as I think the national landscape is learning right now, if you give a reason for Detroit to show up, they will show up and they will show out as good and better than any fan base in professional sports. I mean, as we're talking right now, the Tigers are getting ready to leave Houston after going and sweeping the Astros in the wild card round. And at the very least, in game one, it sounded like a Tigers home game.
Oh,
And
yeah.
this isn't a franchise in the Houston Astros that is struggling in fandom or in support. This is one of the most, like one of the most enthusiastic fan bases in baseball. And you had the Tigers fans drowning them out. And then you for their game that they clinched, they had 45,000 people show up, for that. Tying back to the Pistons, do you and I not remember the 8 or 9-year streak where the Pistons sold out every single home game when this team
Absolutely.
when this team
Yes.
was in the running to not even be like a championship team, but just to
Mm-hmm.
be a playoff team?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like if you give this fan base an excuse to show up, they will show up and they will show out. And I think you have a group that, not only I think they understand that. I think you have a group of guys that want to be a part of that.
Yeah, they're proving it. They're showing that it means something. Cade going to the game and soaking in that energy. Jay Ivey having family ties, obviously with his father playing in Detroit, his mother playing in Detroit, his grandfather playing with the Lions, like that that matters, and he knows what that feels like in his blood. Even going back to when Cade was before he was drafted, when he's at Comerica and they're chanting, we want Cade," like that energy is there. And that was a very common question that was asked throughout media day, and they did a good job of proving and showing that that does mean something. I mean, y'all were the last team that came to downtown. You don't want to be, the one that's left out, especially when
Yep.
the Lions have turned things around now. You don't want to
Yep.
be the one. You don't want to be the stepchild that's still trying to figure it out and get things together. They're seeing that energy. They want to be a part of that excitement. And yeah, 100%. Even if you look back to last season, even during the losing streak, fans were still showing up.
I was
Fans were
gonna say,
still coming through. It was crazy to see.
I was
But I mean,
yeah.
yeah, it's there.
Yeah, the Pistons just had their worst record in franchise history. They had the longest losing streak in professional basketball history, almost in the history of professional sports.
Hmm.
And even with all of that, Eric, they finished 15th in attendance in the league.
That's
So
unbelievable.
we're like even when the Pistons are not necessarily giving the same reasons to show up as the other franchises have,
Hmm.
Pistons fans are still showing up and showing out. So you have, like you and I both know that just we have our ear to the ground, and we're very ingrained in this city. We know that, like this city is starving for, for something to root for something to cheer about.
For
And,
sure.
I just, again, are we biased? You're damn right we are. But, I think we just know as well as anybody when this city is hitting on all cylinders when it comes to sports. It is truly one of the premier sports towns in the country. And, people will disagree with me. That's fine. Respectfully, come to a game and tell me what you think after. Like, come to a play,
100%.
like go to a Lions game. Like, if you can even find tickets.
Check out a Lions road game. They're taking
Yep.
over Arizona. They're making the home teams and their fan bases look like child's play. The Lions have been dominating over the past couple
I mean,
seasons in attendance.
it's literally to a point where I told my buddy, I was like, the cheapest way for me to go see the Lions this year is to go to see them in Indianapolis. It's
Yeah,
not to go
you
see
gotta
them in
travel.
Detroit.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
you gotta travel out now. Apparently,
Yep.
I forgot who put the graphic up, but yeah, the Lions are the most expensive ticket in the NFL right now. And we
Yep.
all see why. We all see
Yep.
it.
Yep. And if the Pistons start winning and those guys, start playing the way that they can, I'm telling you, man, the Little Caesars Arena, we saw it already in their one playoff, like the one playoff run they had in that arena. That they filled that stadium even when they got swept against Milwaukee. So, I promise you, man, they'll show up. So, Eric, seriously, man, this is so fun. We gotta run it back more during the season.
Of
Thank you so
course.
much
Of
for
course.
coming on, and just remind the people, where can they find your work? Where do people need to be?
Man, I appreciate you, Sean. Thanks a lot, brother. Everybody else for tuning in, I appreciate you as well. Follow me on all my socials at I am Eric Vincent. You can hit me up on my socials. You can follow my work on Clutch Points, clutchpoints.com. Plenty of Pistons coverage, Lions coverage on there. Subscribe to my YouTube channel, Top Title Entertainment. Again, more Piston coverage on there. A little music coverage here, WWE talk, a lot of great conversation and content that I'd love for you to be a part of. Again, I love being a part of this Detroit sports community. Being able to work with great people like Sean Murphy means the world to me. This is always a great time, man. I appreciate you for having me on.
My guy, I appreciate you. And hey, if you ever need someone to swing by and talk some wrestling, man, I am all about it. Don't get me wrong. I
We
love
got to
talking
talk about
basketball.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
talk about like talking about basketball is my first love. Don't get me wrong. But if I tell you, if I were to have told you that wrestling is not a mistress, that is creeping into my life, I would be lying, man. It is just,
uh,
oh man, right.
uh,
If you don't like wrestling, with all due respect, go to therapy, because I promise you, if you once you start that journey of self-discovery and can enjoy wrestling, life's better. I
it
promise.
is. It's
Yep.
beautiful. She a mistress with a key to the with a key to the house right now, man.
Yeah.
WWE is red hot, and I'm having a ball right now. We definitely got to talk about that more for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. But But man, thank you for being here. Thank you to the people for listening. Be sure you like the video down below and subscribe for more content. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.